This is my $500 BMW E46. It is a 2002 330i with a 5-speed manual transmission, and it has 161,000 miles on it. Yes, I know that is very cheap, and yes, I did get very lucky. Now, BMWs are famous for their oil leaks. If they're not leaking oil, they don't have oil in them. And today I'm gonna be showing you how to do the most common oil leak repair on any BMW. That is the oil pan gasket. Although we fixed all the oil leaks on the top end, this BMW is no exception. And our final oil leak repair on this BMW is the dreaded oil pan gasket. You can see it collecting on this passenger side seam right here. Sway bar is all saturated. And also, if you look down here by the drain bolt, all that oil there collecting. Now, if you own a BMW, your oil pan gasket is probably leaking too, but you're in luck because this video is going to be a step-by-step guide on exactly how you can replace your own oil pan gasket on your BMW. Doesn't matter if it's an E46 or an E39 or an E53. As long as it has a M54 engine, this is going to be a great resource for you. It's going to give you a bunch of helpful tips and tricks so you can save time and money on your own BMW. And even if you don't drive a BMW and you want to learn something new, grab a cold beverage, grab a nice snack, kick your feet up, listen to the sound of my soothing voice, and hang out with me as we take the bottom side of this car from oil saturated to shiny and bitchin' and brand new again. Step 1, get your car up in the air. I'm using this Vevor 5,000 pound car lift. If you don't have one of those, get yourself a good old fashioned floor jack and some jack stands. Step 2, we're gonna drain the oil. So pull off your oil cap, take a 36 millimeter socket with a 1/2 inch ratchet, break your oil filter canister loose. We don't need to take it out all the way, but what we are gonna do is break the seal on this O-ring so we can allow the entire block to drain down into the oil pan. So I like to loosen it just until I can hear that oil gurgle, or until I can kind of see that O-ring on the canister cap there, and we can let that thing sit and drain. Next step, get yourself a 3/8 ratchet with a 17 millimeter socket. Break the drain plug loose for your oil pan. Get yourself a nice oil drain pan down here underneath it. Take that drain plug out like a dang ninja. What I do is I push forward pressure on the drain plug until I feel the threads completely separate and the plug gets super wobbly. Keep that forward pressure, left turn till those threads are completely out, and then fast ninja style. No mess, all clean. We're gonna let that drain.
A few minutes later.
We're gonna let this keep draining because I want all the oil out of that pan. All the oil I can get. Okay, drain plug back in. I know you're like, oh, you didn't put a new crush washer on there. Don't worry, we're gonna do it later. I got you guys, I got your back. This is gonna be a 100% step-by-step complete guide with socket sizes, part numbers, all the stuff. Good and tight. Next step, remove the thrust plate, 16 millimeter bolts. There's like 8 of them. I love using power tools. Makes your job a lot faster. Electric ratchets, electric impact guns. Sometimes they don't have the guts. Put these on tight. It's good, it should be tight. Woo, could have really blown out a knuckle there. All right, now let's rip them off. By the way, does anybody golf? I just started playing golf. I'm absolutely addicted to the game. I'm gonna start a golf channel. All right, last bolt. Thrust plate removed. Look at all that water, oil, garbage. Get that junk out of here. So while we're down here, let's loosen these control arms. We're gonna disconnect the control arm bushings from the unibody. 2 16 millimeter bolts on each side. Might need a little bit bigger ratchet for these. I'm using my 1/2 inch. Depends on how tight someone put them on before you. And we're removing these because we are prepping to drop the subframe. Boom shakalaka. He's getting a little tired. No way, they're replaced. We'll look at them later. Okay, while we're down here, let's take a 13 mil. Let's knock out the nuts here for the sway bar to the unibody. Now we can drop the sway bar down. Now I take my impact gun with a 16 millimeter socket for this sway bar end link and a 17 millimeter wrench to hold the sway bar end link from spinning behind it. And I whack it with the impact gun. There we go. There's one side. Okay, now we need to get the cooling fan out to get access to the tensioner because we got to drop the power steering pump to get it out of the way. So let's take these push pins out. I like to use a little panel popper push pin tool like this. Take those 3 out, pull that out from the air box. Okay, now this is an electric cooling fan. You may have a mechanical cooling fan. There's two different kinds. Mechanicals, you have to knock the fan clutch off of the water pump here. This one I don't. So just disconnect this connector right here. Disconnect this one. 2 plugs, one big, one little, and then pull the wiring out from the fan there. And then there's one push pin over here. Use our tool to pop that one out. And a T25 torque screw over here. So for our belt tensioner, this is the hydraulic style. So what you're gonna do, take a little screwdriver, pop that cover off. So it has an 8mm Allen head bolt on the inside of this. If you have the mechanical type, there'll be like a 16mm hex right over here or over here somewhere, and you put a 16mm socket on that. But on this style, it doesn't have it. So you just put an 8mm Allen socket in there and then turn it clockwise. I'll show you. That pulley loses tension. Slip the belt off, either the alternator, the idler, wherever you can fit your hand down. Release the pulley. Take your ratchet out and then just flop the belt off. You can take it just off the power steering pump if you wanted to, if you don't want to lose the diagram. I like to take it off like this and just flop up over here to the left out of the way. Now our power steering pump has 3 bolts, 113 there, 113 there, and 113 right there that bolts up into the bottom of the oil filter housing. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. Now this power steering pump is nice and loose. We can flop it out of the way, get access to our oil pan bolts. All right, next I'm gonna disconnect this little 10mm bolt, and this just holds the high pressure power steering hose to the rack and pinion. And this is gonna give us some extra slack between the power steering pump and the subframe. Another thing I like to do too is if the oil's out, I just put the cap on loose so I don't drop anything down there. All right, next step, we're gonna take a long extension and a 16mm socket. We're gonna remove that nut right there, and that is the engine mount to the engine mount bracket. We're also gonna come over here onto this side with the intake hose, take a long extension, find that bracket down there, and we're going to take the 16mm nut off of the engine mount on this side too. If you go down right behind the dipstick tube here, you'll be able to see it. So I usually just put all my 3/8, or at least my long 3/8 extensions together like this with a wobble 16mm socket. Sneak it down behind that dipstick tube, drop it right on top of there. Don't worry about getting the nut back up. If you drop it, that's okay, we'll get it later. It's off, it's just chilling on top. Same thing on passenger side. There we go. Next step, I got my engine support bar. I bought this from Harbor Freight. It was like $100. If you don't have a Harbor Freight near you, I'm gonna put the link in the description for an Amazon. And also, if you see any other random tools throughout this job, I'm gonna put the Amazon links in the description for you. So what we do is we get this engine support bar set up to where it sits on the fender lips like this. And then we take this hook here, and we're dropping this hook into this little spot on the cylinder head. And so what this is doing is this bar is supporting and holding the engine up so we can drop the subframe out from the bottom so we can get access to the oil pan. Just give it a couple cranks. All right, we're good. And if you got this engine support bar installed, you should really use a hood lock, because if this hood comes down, it's gonna hit that stud and you're going to absolutely destroy your hood. I'll put the link in the description for these. They're super cool. It's just a little thumb screw. Slide it over here on your lift support, twist it, it's gonna lock it down and hold it. Hood ain't going nowhere. Okay, so before we drop the subframe to get access to the oil pan, we need to come back here to our steering column. This is where the steering shaft and the steering wheel connect down into the rack and pinion. See that little E-Torx right there? It's like an E10. We need to rip that bolt out. Then we need to take this shaft and slip it up out of that collar, disconnect the steering column from the rack and pinion. Because when we drop the subframe, the rack and pinion's going with it. Yep, E10, break it loose. There we go. Then bring your arm up, wiggle it till you can see some shiny stuff. That's how you know the column is slid up, and you can work the rest of it off as we drop the rest of the subframe down. All right, guys, next step, we're gonna be dropping the subframe. So I got a floor jack here, and I'm gonna go up with it to the center of the subframe. This is gonna hold it up and allow us to gently lower it down after we remove these bolts. All right, so bring the floor jack up, block of wood to make up for the extra height, and just put it snug. 18mm socket on a 1/2" impact gun, or an 18mm socket on a 1/2" ratchet. And we're gonna go up here, start taking out our subframe bolts. There's 4 of them. And one other thing, over here, there is a headlight level sensor, and it has this little rod that connects down to the control arm. What we're gonna do is disconnect this electrical sensor, because when this subframe drops, that wire is gonna go tight and you don't wanna tear that. There we go, that's disconnected. I'm gonna take these wheels off real quick too, because with these wheels still on the car, they're gonna be flopping around. See this? Flopping around with the subframe. Now we can take out the 2 driver's side subframe bolts. All right, now we can release our floor jack, start to drop our subframe down a little bit, give it a little bit of slack. Might have to like get up here, wiggle the control arm, wiggle the subframe, go down a little bit more. It's hung up a little bit. There we go. See it dropped? This is, yeah, this piece goes between the oil pan and the subframe for when the engine mounts get too flat. Now, while we're dropping the subframe, what you need to do is bring it down a little bit and then come up and check on that steering column. Our steering column is completely disconnected now, so we're safe. So now there's nothing else holding it up. We can keep going down with the floor jack and keep dropping our subframe down. And there you go. We have a nice loose subframe. So now that we have the subframe down, we got a lot of room to get our oil pan out. But there is also the dipstick tube that is bolted up here to the engine mount bracket, and we need to get that disconnected before we can get this pan out. So there's a little 13mm bolt right up here on the side of the engine mount bracket. We're gonna take that out with a wrench, and then we'll be able to take this dipstick tube, slide it up and out and disconnect it, and we'll deal with it later. Here we got our oil level sensor. We can go ahead and disconnect that. There's a little clip here where it connects onto the oil pan. We're gonna disconnect that as well. Now, if you do have an automatic transmission car, there's going to be two automatic transmission lines that run here on the driver's side of the pan. There's two 10mm bolts that bolt it to the side of the pan. Just unbolt those two bolts, disconnect them from the brackets, keep them loose, and you'll be able to get the pan out no problem. So other than that, we are completely set up to start removing this oil pan. All right, let's get started with these E10s. Now I'm using this E10 wobble socket. It's snap-on, so it's super overpriced, but I'm going to put a link for wobble sockets in the description for you guys because they are a BMW mechanic's best friend. They are so helpful for those hard to reach E10 spots. One there, and then one tucked up here. All right, now that those three are out, we can just start hitting all the 10mm that hold this thing in. Now before I get too carried away, there's a couple long E10s here in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Two of them are inside these holes to the bell housing, so don't forget those. We'll knock those out first. Electric ratchets will make your life a lot easier during this job. And if you're just a DIYer, I still recommend getting an electric ratchet. They just will save you so much time. I don't need you falling on me just yet. Pull out my last bolt. This thing, the nose is gonna drop and it's gonna spill oil on you. And it did it on me last time when I was doing Eric's oil pan. There we go, I got it off the dipstick. Oil pan's down. Check out all this oil in this thing. Now it's also a good idea to sort of stick your hand in it and look and feel for any debris. Look for any sort of shiny metallic type oil in here because all this oil stays in the pan when you do an oil service. It doesn't drain out because the drain plug location isn't that low. Like here's a little bit of debris. It's a piece of plastic, but other than that, it's not looking too bad. I mean, again, this was a $500 E46. It was sitting for like 4 or 5 years in this dude's front driveway, and I ended up buying it and fixing it up. And if you're curious of how I did that, I have a whole playlist on this car, and it will show you step by step every single thing that I did to turn this car from a $500 piece of junk sitting in the driveway to a pretty reliable daily driver. I've been dailying this car for over a year now, just beating it up and riding it hard and putting it away wet. Now, before we get this pan cleaned up, I'm gonna take out the oil level sensor, 3 10mm nuts. And I'm actually gonna be replacing this oil level sensor because on startup, I get a steady yellow oil light. And if you get a steady yellow oil light for like 10-15 seconds after startup, that's your car telling you that your oil level sensor is not working properly. So if that ever happens, you just replace the entire sensor. You can find them at an affordable price at fcpeuro.com. Now I'm gonna let this thing soak in some degreaser before I clean it up. So I'm gonna throw it inside of this big tote. I'm gonna take a bunch of this purple power. I'm gonna pour it in here with the oil pan. All right, I filled this up with hot water, so we're just gonna dilute that purple power so we can get some extra coverage. Now, I usually just like take this outside and pressure wash it, but this method works pretty well just for helping to break down stuff. Sometimes the pressure washer doesn't get all of it. Tomorrow I'll come out and give this thing a good scrub, and we'll probably take it out and pressure wash it afterwards too. I'll take a brush and just try to clean this up. So we're all set up. This thing's gonna be degreasing overnight, and I'm gonna show you guys one more thing. Another thing I did before I head in for dinner is I threw a scrap piece of cardboard down. This engine is gonna keep dripping. That oil pump pickup's gonna keep dripping down. It's just a good way to save your concrete inside your garage or your driveway from getting all stained up. So I'm gonna head in for the evening, let this pan degrease overnight, and then tomorrow we'll get her cleaned up and then begin the reassembly process. I'll see you guys then.
The next day.
Time to clean up this pan, put it all back together. I'm gonna go pressure wash this thing.
A few minutes later.
We got the thrust plate, the underbody panel, the sway bar, and the oil pan all cleaned up. Let's get this thing polished and start putting it back together. Now right here's where the dipstick tube goes down, drains the oil from the breather back into the oil pan. There's an O-ring in here that seals it. When I have the oil pan off, I like to take a plastic brush like this and go in here and just sort of polish up that hole. That way if there's any old oil, any dirt, anything like that, it's not gonna interfere with my O-ring sealing into the oil pan. Next, we got a pneumatic die grinder, blue Scotch-Brite disc, nice and soft. We're just gonna lightly scuff this mating surface. All right, it's time for my least favorite part of this entire job, cleaning up this gasket surface before you put the new pan back up. But this is also the most important part of the job, because if you don't prep this surface up well, you're gonna have to go in here and do it again. Your oil pan gasket isn't gonna seal well, it's gonna leak, and you're gonna have to redo all of this labor. So it's really important to spend the extra time, really clean this surface up well. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time in the long run. Here's the old dipstick tube O-ring, and I like to take a little bit of Scotch-Brite. Okay, I'm out of brake cleaner, so I'm just using some isopropyl alcohol, some sort of solvent, so I can just wipe down this gasket surface, get any of the residual oil off there. Now let's talk about parts. This is everything that you need for your oil pan gasket replacement job. From the OE oil pan gasket, engine mounts to replace while the subframe is down, the dipstick tube O-ring, sealant for the oil pan itself, brand new nuts for the engine mounts, an oil level sensor if yours is bad like mine, or you can just go ahead and replace just the gasket. We have 7 quarts of oil, and we have a new filter. Now it is very important to get your parts for your BMW from a reputable source. I've bought parts from O'Reilly and AutoZone before, and they simply just will not work on these cars. They will fail, you will have to warranty them, it will be a huge headache. That's why I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, FCP Euro. Now, FCP Euro is the #1 BMW and European parts supplier in the nation. They were actually recommended to me by a viewer of mine named Cone, and I've been using them ever since. They have the best warranty, the absolute best parts catalog. They have a warehouse in Connecticut and Arizona, so you're gonna get your parts super fast no matter where you are in the US. Now they have all the options that you could want, from OE to aftermarket, and they even sell retrofitting kits like these Melee control arms that go on an M3, and I'll be installing them on my E90 335 next video. Now FCP Euro is my one-stop shop for everything BMW parts related, and they should be yours too. Head over to fcpeuro.com or hit the link in my description to check them out. And a big thank you to FCP Euro for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to work. A little bit of Curil T on the gasket sealing surface. Now you can put these on dry, you can use RTV silicone, you can use L-ring Curil T2 like me, whatever floats your boat. All right, gasket goes down. Now I'm gonna throw some zip ties through this to help keep the gasket in place, because these gaskets will get bumped out of place on the reinstallation. Now before we put the oil pan back up, we gotta get all this little stuff cleaned off, right? Like a little bead of oil. Another thing I wanna do is take this Curil T2, put it right here where the timing cover meets the upper pan or the block, just for a little reassurance. I try to do this on all my oil pans and valve covers. Right here in the rear too, where that rear main connects up. Forgot to clean the oil pan bolts, so I just threw them in a cup with some purple power. Last step before we put this pan back up, gotta reinstall our new dipstick tube O-ring. I use a bunch of Sil Glide, slide that all the way to the top, because we're gonna have to guide that down into the oil pan as we put it back up. Get that dipstick tube started, fit that rear end up into the bell housing, then fit the front end up behind the crank pulley. Now it's important before you snug any bolts up tight that you get all of them in, because you need to make sure they all fit through the gasket and then into the block. We also need to tighten these bell housing bolts first to suck this pan backwards. Then we can snug up all the other stuff. Let's cut our zip ties out of here. All right, let's snug up these E10s so we can get this pan to suck backwards a little bit. All right, I'll be torquing this oil pan to 10 Newton meters, and I'm gonna try to go inside and out and equal and opposite. I think it's 10 meters. If you think the torque spec is different, go ahead, drop a comment down below. And if you guys are doing this job yourself, be sure to check the comment section. There are a lot more people out there that know more than me, and they usually help correct me in the comments. While you're in there, tell me what your favorite part of this video is. All right, next step, what we're gonna do, take your hand, reach up onto this dipstick tube, pull it down till it pops in place like that. Then reach up with your finger, feel inside that dipstick tube bracket, make sure that hole lines up. When you put this dipstick tube back in, you can really feel it pop to get that O-ring to seat. So that's what you're looking for. Snug that up like that. Okay, now go up there with that 13mm socket or a wrench. Snug up the dipstick tube bolt. Okay, dipstick tubes back in. And while we're here and you're here, let's put this oil level sensor, this brand new Hella oil level sensor up. And torque these to 10 Newton meters. If you're working on BMWs, having a 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch digital torque wrench will help a lot, especially for valve covers, oil filter housings, oil pans, all the oil leaks. Plug her in, boom! Okay, next let's swap out these engine mounts. You can see they have a little nipple on the bottom side, so that helps locate and clock them in. What you do is take a 16mm socket on the bottom side here. Take that nut off, pull the old engine mount out. It's definitely a little bit taller. Anytime you have the subframe down, and if you have original engine mounts, please replace them. Your car will drive so much better. It'll get rid of all that vibration sitting at stoplights. And what's really nice is FCP also supplies new nuts with the engine mounts, so you can refresh both nuts, top and bottom. Torque spec, good and tight. Now this one has a little heat shield, and it locks in up here on these little things, and it protects the engine mount from the exhaust. Let's put this power steering pump back up, and we can start working on putting the subframe up. Hey Sage, come here. Come here, hello. I can't pet you, I got dirty hands. Oh, you want a hug? Do you want a hug? All right, time to put the subframe back up. What do we have to be mindful of as the subframe comes back up? Little quiz question for you guys. What do you think? Steering column shaft. Gotta be mindful of the steering column shaft, okay? As we go up, you gotta come over here. Extend the steering column shaft till you get it to line up with the rack and pinion, okay? And then once you start getting up, you need to start looking for the studs off the top of the engine mounts. You need to line those up with the brackets. Everything's looking good. There we go. Now it's all sandwiched in there. All right, now we can release it. Get that floor jack out of here. Next step, put that E-Torque screw back in for the steering column before we forget. Now the bolts for the thrust plate have these 2 lips. The bolts for the control arms have 1 washer. That's how you tell them apart. And there's only 4 of them. Plug in our headlight level sensor, put our little 10mm bolt in back for the power steering hose. All right, another thing is we need to reach up and put our nuts back on the top of the engine mounts. Take our new nuts that came from FCP Euro with the engine mounts and just get them started. That way we don't have to reach down from the top. So there's driver, there's passenger. All right, and then we loosely put our drain plug in there for cleaning, and we never replace the crush washer. So let's pull that oil drain plug, make sure there's no washer on it. Use your new washer. Get this sway bar. Sway bar link nuts. All right, let's slap this thrust plate on. Making really good progress. Let's get this engine support bar out of here. All right, let's snug up these engine mounts. What you doing? What you doing, huh? What you doing? Oh yeah, oh yeah. All right, we gotta get this belt back on. I don't know if I said it before, but a really good note, when you have the belt off here, go through each individual pulley, spin it by hand. See, that idler is actually a little bit noisy. Tensioner's a little noisy too. So we should update those in the future. Not right now because I don't have the parts, but we'll do a video on it for you guys on how to update and replace the belts and the tensioner on the M54. Take our 8mm socket, press that tensioner. This one's hydraulic. Slide that belt over, and then I say this every time, go through, recheck all the pulleys with your hand. Cooling fan, push pin. Oh my God. I don't know what caused that. I did the oil service on this car myself. I think it was a cheap O'Reilly Auto Parts filter. There's so much sludge caked in there too. Like, look at that. That's just engine sludge. You know, this engine is not that healthy. It burns quite a bit of oil, about 1 quart every 1,000 miles. I'm pretty sure the valve seals or something in the top end is leaking. I've never seen so much sludge in an engine before. It was a Wix filter. I never thought I'd be one of the cars to have a filter like this in it, all sucked up. Might just be the condition of this engine. I don't know, guys. This is crazy though. I always say this too, these are 5-liter bottles, not 5 quarts. So this actually has 5.3 quarts in it. Always be mindful if you're using European oil, figure out what measurement it's actually in. Don't just assume it's a 5-quart jug. I'm gonna be going just shy of this 7th liter because I wanna make sure I wanna overfill it. You do lose a little bit of oil when you do the oil pan gasket because you get rid of that little leftover oil that sits in each oil service. It's always good just to go a little shy. All right, we're ready to fire this thing up. But before we do that, let's check all our fluids. We know the oil, we got 7 quarts in there. Power steering fluids at the bottom line, nice and ruby red. Engine coolant, coolant's a little low. All right, we should be good to fire this thing up, see how she runs, and then start putting the wheels and the underbody panel back on and getting her pressure washed. Let's fire this thing up, see how she runs. It's probably gonna run way better without that sucked up oil filter in it. No more yellow oil light, that is completely gone. So far so good. She's sounding good, she's running good. She's not hemorrhaging any oil yet. I was just setting tire pressures, wrapping this thing up, getting it ready to put it on the ground. This tire only has 21 PSI in it. It's supposed to be at 38, so let's figure out why it is low. There it is. Super, super small leak over towards the sidewall. Tiny little nail. So a tire shop will not be able to legally repair it, but that's okay because this is a $500 car and I can repair it myself. I have a tire plug kit here from the auto parts store. I'm gonna show you how to do it. First step is you need to get whatever's inside your tire out. In this case, it's this little tiny nail. Next step, take this reaming tool that comes in the kit, go down, and we need to open up the hole. So you need to find whatever direction it went in, and you need to go all the way through like that, and go up and down. Next step, take your plug, squeeze it through this little slot in this tire plug tool. And then what I like to do is buy some vulcanizing tire cement from the auto parts store. And I take this and I brush it on the tire plug, give it a little bit better ability to seal than just a dry plug. Now you pull your reamer, take your plug, push down until just the tag ends of the plug are showing. Then you pull out. Now you need to trim off the excess and check for leaks. Now this is like a get out of trouble type method. Tire shops legally have to patch plug tires, and the standard is inside these 2 water channels. If it's in here, you can repair it. If it's on the outside, you can't patch it. So for one of my cars that only I'll be driving, I'm okay with this. But if you want to go the legal route, if it's out here, you're technically supposed to replace the tire. And also, tire plugs are just supposed to be temporary. No bubbles, no more leaks. All right, we just fixed that leak in the rear left tire. We let the car run for a little bit. You always wanna check the oil after you let the car run for a minute because that oil is gonna circulate and the level's gonna drop just a little bit after your first startup. We are right at the top line. Perfect spot. Throw our little duct cover on and we are done, guys. Now after I do oil pan gaskets, I always take the car outside and then pressure wash the undercarriage and get all the old residual oil off, but it's raining out there and it's kind of yucky, so we're gonna just slap the underbody panel back on and call it good. We'll do that another day and we'll maybe go over a video on how to clean and degrease the undercarriage of your car. My name is Alec. Ugh. This wet dog is Sage and we are Day Off DIY. I teach BMW owners how to fix their own cars, save them time and money. So if this video was helpful for you, and if you think I deserved it, I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out in trying to work as a content creator full-time for you guys. So drop a comment down below, tell me what part of the video was your favorite, and if you have any information that you'd like to share on the oil pan gasket replacement job for the BMW N54, I would love it if you would add some advice or words of wisdom down below. A big thank you to FCP Euro for sponsoring today's video. I hope you enjoyed or I hope you learned something new, and as always folks, I'll see you on my next day off. Cheers.